Here we go. And so we began this council right about COVID, like January of 2020, and it's been going strong ever since. Chris and I and Amy, I believe, were like original members. Uh, James was there in the beginning, and everyone else here has been on for a while. Um, Maybe Celia and Lauren more recently joined, but we have a very stable, dependable crew here, and it makes the job so much easy. And I love working with these people, and they're all dedicated to their craft and dedicated to the tug itself, and I appreciate every single one of them. Um, so if you want to join the fun, and there's more fun than you think there is because we get together once a quarter for dinner, um, then we'll welcome you with open arms. We're looking for people who like to do marketing, event planning. Um, there's administrative work that has to do with setting up those invites that you get and all those reminders. And then we have recordings that need to be published. So we're always uh, welcoming people who have those skills or at least the interest to learn. Um, but if you just like networking, hanging out with people uh, that are fun to be around, then reach out and become part of the team. So our agenda will be um, a meeting format. We'll have a few announcements as I'm doing right now. And we have two featured speakers. One is going to be our own Celia Frere, who is a member of our advisory council, and she is going to be under the spotlight. We're going to all look at Celia and find out who she is and what she does, and it'll be very interesting. Um, and then our featured speaker is Roshni Gohil, uh, who is going to give a presentation on accessibility matters in universal design. I'm sure you will find that interesting, and we are looking forward to hearing that. So, just our usual housekeeping, customary Zoom etiquette. Uh, Stay on mute unless we ask you to come off mute. If we do ask you to come off mute, then please do that. Sometimes it's easier for you to just ask your question verbally than to try to type it. But most of the time, you can just type your questions in the chat, and we'll collect them and tee them up at the end. Um, and then after that, we'll go into a networking session um, where anybody who's interested in meeting some of the other participants and asking questions, we call that time the AAAT, Ask Anyone Anything Tableau. Although I would open it up more to anything related to data analytics is fair game. Here are some of the other events we have coming up. Our meeting in February, we'll have Rain Ortega, who's user group program lead, and he'll be talking about data friends forever, finding your people in your path. I think that'll be a great talk. And of course, TC26 will be a little bit later this year, May instead of April, and registration will be opening for that very soon. In addition to these meetings, we also have ways to communicate and network with each other on our Slack channel, and we encourage you to join those. We have channels where you can find out about future and past events, how to get the recordings. You can introduce yourself. If you're looking for your next gig, you can let people know. There's lots of ways to use Slack to advance your knowledge and your career in data science. So now we'd like to switch the focus from me to Celia. Celia is both an expert in Tableau and also an educator. and she's currently working at Zeomatrix in addition to other things that she does. She's a Tableau ambassador and many other things that I think would be better if she explained than if I tried to do it. Cecilia, tell us about yourself.
First of all, hello. Thank you for being here today. Being part of the Austin Tableau user group advisory board has been a lot of fun. I got to tell you, if you are all interested and in the area, have a heart for Texas, the wealth of bringing to the table things from the richness that is Austin area, please jump in. We always are looking for fresh ideas and for new people to be in community with us. So and you guys just have to pardon me. I'm like going to share with you from two different decks that I have used a couple times recently, just to kind of give you a flavor for a little bit of what is has become my career and why I do what I do. So there's a couple of things I wanted to emphasize today, and one of which is I've been very blessed to be in tech my whole career. I really love the rate of change, even though that may sound counterintuitive. I have a very high change score. I love the rate of change that's happening in the industry, and the stories I get to tell my kids about what it used to look like versus what we have now are just so much fun. But largely what I do has to do with bringing people into the industry and also funding those scuba diving expeditions that my family goes on. So that's why that's there. Now, speaking of environments that I've gotten to be a part of, to train and to bring along, walk alongside of people as they are either near Delta in what we call data adjacent jobs. So maybe they have some sort of technical degree or they have an interest in it, and they've had the wish to be part of data analytics, data science, or data engineering. Each one of these things that's on screen right now is representative of a chunk of the last 10 years of my life, and how I got to be called in to be part of one of these big projects where, in Saudi Arabia, we had two different big cities. We had 300 people plus applying for, like 33 slots in each of the two classrooms. One was for data analytics, was for Python programming that was all aimed at analysis. So, that sort of thing where the combination of tools and skills, and then how in some of these environments, like in the far right here, where I was involved with hire, trade, deploy, attract, retain, or deploy, those sort of situations where there's a sales team working to help people find opportunities, but we had to get them ready to go be successful in the interview cycles, to both prove that they could do it and then have portfolio work to back up that they could do it, and to use some of those techniques and skills and collateral things you carry into an interview to not only communicate the skills that they had acquired, but also then demonstrate, even though they didn't have as much field experience as what would typically be required in that circumstance, to show that they did have the chops to get it done and to do it well. And so, for example, the one logo that's on here, Talent Path, I ended up being head of learning and development for that group. We sent just over 300 people to market. One of our more successful campaigns was we sent a batch of people to, actually 5 pods of people to Dell, and most of them are still there. We sent a group of people to Vanguard. We sent a group of people to Phillips 66. And so, like, each one of those had a different persona that they were looking for. Like our Dell guys, they were looking for AI, ML engineers that were doing a combination of model maintenance for data science models, and then also maintenance and deployment for, Kubernetes, Docker, that sort of stuff. So, like, each one has brought its specific interesting challenges and a different type of student persona. And it's really been very informative to me to learn how to respond to different people in different seasons of their lives and different places in terms of their need and their desires, and then to help make that happen. So that's been the real privilege of my life to do that. And then also my university side of my life has been mostly between University of San Francisco, and then also I got to live and work in the at University of Bahamas for a season. Much similar kind of theme song though, where University of Bahamas, there was a ambassador who had expressed he'd run on the campaign of being able to help rebuild the middle class. And so along with that, he'd recruited business leaders who would offer internships to students who completed a 16-week program. Then they kind of schemed out what they wanted, sketched out what they wanted to have in terms of a strategy and content. And then I got called in to come create and deliver. So it was really quite the interesting situation, mixture of culture differences and the pressure cooker of like materials that I conceived and then created, delivered. It was really very, very life-giving in so many ways. And so to get to the privilege and responsibility and the honor of working with people like that, where you are helping them redefine normal and redefine what their expectations on the future work experience is going to be, has been something I have really, really enjoyed. Even with University of San Francisco, I'm kind of an outsider in higher ed because I don't have all the appropriate labels that go with my my formal credentialing, except for I have the field experience and I have the walking it out with people experience. So the dean that hired me initially was saying, we need your outside experience to be able to come in and help people prepare for internships. So that's what I've done. It's been in through SQL programming and data analytics and data visualization, but it's always aimed at getting someone to market. And what are you going to do when you have to apply for that internship? And what are you going to share and show? And let's make that more polished. And do you know how to use AI tools? And nope, that's not a good answer. Let's go ahead and press in and do better. And so that's been a huge part of my life and something I've really, really enjoyed. Now, the other part of the things that I wanted to share with you have a little bit more to do with the why behind the what, that starts a little further back, but is also a little bit more fun. And I actually created this deck for one of my favorite colleagues in the DataFam is Lewis out of Singapore, I do believe, and he works for U2U or UK2. He's one of the big software development houses for gaming. Gaming was a big part of my life way in the beginning, and what I want to share with you is kind of how the early days of my career went, where I was very much, believe it or not, a gamer once upon a time. And my husband and I co-wrote one of the first, if not the first, multi-user game in the early 90s on the Apple Top network. Now, I don't mean multiplayer, but I mean multi-user across a network. So it was a real, and we worked with two guys who went on to Google to be amazing humans there and really had a lot of success. So Spectre really kind of redefined normal for us and then kind of launched us into another pathway of, prior to that, I had been in more of the core logic development and systems engineering hardware side of the house. And so this was like a full pivot into more consumer side of the house. And so then I also ended up having children as a part of the context of my life. And so all the games that went with the edutainment side of the house. So that was really important to me to not just let it be junk that was in my home, right? So, and with each of my three that became, as they were growing through the seasons of their lives, to help them do things that were social and complex and logic-based was part of the context of my life and important in my core values. And then also because we were home with the young family, we then hosted foreign exchange students from each of the flags that are represented on screen so that we were bringing culture and mixing experiences and building a real sincere appreciation for how we live and do life as humans across the planet. So that was another core tenet of my life. Now, the royalties from the Spectre were initially a good way for me to get to spend more time at home and also with aging parents that had end-of-life issues. But, as the budget gets stretched by people growing up and having more complex and more expensive interests, then I needed to do a little bit more of that diving back into something because this had been the first context of my career of the kinds of things that I was interested in and involved in some of these logos or the places that I had worked in the first chunk of my career. But then past that point, with consumer analytics being a huge part of our lives, I then was starting to see and experience Tableau. And the very first visualization that really caught my attention was this one. And this one used to be proprietary and under confidentiality agreements, but then it got used in public forums like at Oracle presentations and such. So is no longer covered by all that. So anyhow, this was a this was a release and that was happening in like 2011, and MicroStrategy and Tableau and some of those were the analytics reporting tools being used there then. And this, as you probably can tell, is as you look at this viz, it's amount of time it takes to get to certain levels in the game. And there was a lead designer who was they were having some discussions, would be the most polite way to say that, about enrichment of a certain couple character classes that were not being people were not sticking with it, and they'd spent a lot of money on some of that NPC development and voiceovers, and it was a very interesting time in the industry. But the way that the decisions were made and the kind of conversations that came around this one, with the pages shelf being used so the thing was in motion, was just really influential in my way of thinking, and being able to see what and observe what happened there. Then the next step for us in our collective careers was to be involved with wargaming.net, and watching how the player journeys were mapped out, and then also when product releases would happen. This one right here, I ended up taking as a template and using it in my classrooms as we taught Tableau, because along the time that this happened, I was approached by a big bootcamp company to start helping people. This was 2015-16 timeframe. So I was starting to be able to help people walk out that journey of transitioning from band directorship, or I have some sort of MIS degree, but I don't have the tooling to get a job in analytics, because the distance between what universities did and what the market was asking for was pretty substantial right through there. So this was back in the day when Twitter still, you could get a feed from them for free. So, we built lessons around this sort of like integration of URLs and live pages shelf analysis of scatter plots and such. So that was really big for me. And then, I carried it into the classroom around the world. And so these are just some snapshots of the different classrooms that we've had, and just some of the different, what we would call voyages, because my group very much is about data and diving and, kind of making the most of the experiences that life has to offer. So that right there is the presentation that I would offer to you guys. And I just wanted to thank you guys for coming and for being a part of this community, and just know that, analytics is a great place to be. And I also love spending as much time as possible mentoring people as they develop their career or make that next decision. And I'd be very happy to connect with anybody like on LinkedIn, or, and you can see what the kind of things I'm up to on my Tableau public page is accessible. And usually the things that you'll find on my Tableau public page, by the way, are more educational focused. So like yesterday, I did a presentation on a lot of different types of advanced dashboarding. And along with that, I also then put instructions into different pages on the workbook so that you can reproduce them. So feel free to download those things and enjoy them if they're useful to you in your context, or to hit me up on LinkedIn and we can have a chat. So with that, Homer, I'm going to pass the baton back to you, my friend. Ashley, I think I'm introducing Roshni, right? And
Just want to say that that was a great spotlight, because even though I've known you for, coming up on 2 years here, I didn't know half of that stuff about you. And we've had lots of time to chat over dinner and other conversations. So, wow, what a great story. I loved hearing that. Thank you for sharing.
Well, welcome everyone again. And we are very honored to have Roshni here from MIT. She's got to be one of the most welcoming people in the DataFam that I have had the honor to get connected with the last year or two. And as I've been more and more, it's like you sometimes can be so busy with doing your job and working that you don't don't necessarily even know what's out there in terms of available community. And the last couple of years, being more familiar with the DataFam and plugging in with user groups and plugging in with the different opportunities to grow and craft my skill, I can't recommend it enough. And Roshni has been one of those people who's really been something I've admired and followed. She is co-lead and co-founder of the Higher Education Tableau User Group. That may be one of the first places I became familiar with you, actually, Roshni. And then also she's co-lead of the Accessibility Tableau User Group. And she's also part of the data devs culture that is part of also just a complete other section of the DataFam And she has a dyno that you'll see in her presentation that's also on screen here. And I'll let her tell you a little bit more about, but it's been interesting to meet and get to know Roshni now. Roshni will self-describe as an accidental data analyst, and she spent about the last decade working on one side or the other of the MIT endowment analytics that's in business intelligence that's happened around that. And she's also been, at least in my experience of you the last year or so, kind of more of a specialist about accessibility and universal design and how it really it can just open doors to so many more people, and how it's with the tools we have, it's unnecessary for us to be stuck in how it used to be. And to be fair, and Rush, I should tell you this, I guess offline, but nowadays, whenever I teach, we're always using the colorblind palette, if nothing else, because it's like, why not? It's gorgeous and it makes a difference for a good chunk of our population who are needing to, we want to invite them in as well. So without further ado, let me pass the baton to you, my friend, and ask you to please share with us what you've prepared regarding being able to include others in our data conversations and make it accessible for all.
Thank you, Celia. And I'm really glad to hear that you're using the colorblind friendly palette. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I loved Tableau from the very beginning. There's so much thought put into why are we doing visualization the way that we do visualization. And that was like, my introduction to Tableau was, hey, you're going to take a 5-day boot camp. We're paying for it, but you're going to take it. All 5 days. And what I kept seeing over and over again was, well, we're intentionally using these colors because they are more accessible. We're intentionally providing these defaults because these work better for more people. And that sort of feeds into this presentation. So this is my presentation from Tableau Conference 2025. So it's a little bit of an extension of that presentation. I've added slides here and there because I've given it a few times and people have asked questions, and I wanted to provide more information. So welcome to Accessibility Matters. Universal design means data for all. As Celia mentioned, I am Roshni Gohil. These are some of my dinosaurs. You're going to meet them all again later. And I really want to thank you for coming to my talk today. Celia mentioned the DataFam, and this talk was in fact inspired by the DataFam. Someone mentioned in a Slack channel, hey, it'd be great if we could see a presentation on accessibility. And so I bloopity-bloopity-blooped, like threw in a presentation proposal. Speaking of, if you want to present it to Tableau Conference 2026, the deadline for submitting a presentation proposal is tomorrow, January 16th. But I just, submitted a presentation and I was like, this is not going to get accepted. And then again, here it was. And I was like, okay, I got to make this happen. But, again, it was inspired by the DataFam, and I really, really hope that it inspires you to bring universal design and accessibility into your Tableau development process. So I'm going to introduce you to universal design through my own experiences with a temporary impairment. And it was a fun one, not really fun. I'll share what pre-attentive attributes and the pop-out effect are, and what they tell us about universal design for visualization. We'll walk through a bunch of different ways to use color and size and text to build out universally usable and accessible dashboards in Tableau. So, what exactly is universal design? Let me tell you about it through my recent adventures in the Fractured Wrist department. And just in case you're wondering, that was supposed to be a play on a Taylor Swift album title. I've never heard anything from said album. Sorry, I'm not a Swiftie. But there's a whole bunch of music references built in throughout this. So if you catch them, feel free to call them out in the Slack or in the chat, and I'll giggle inside. Anyway, as Celia mentioned, I work at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, back in Cambridge, MA. I'm actually looking across the river at Boston. It's like Austin, but with a B. Very different. So I recently moved to the fundraising arm of the MIT Sloan School of Management. But until last summer, I actually worked at Matimco, the MIT investment management company, aka the endowment. So Matimco's mission is to earn outstanding long-term investment returns for the institute so that students can get great educations and have access to opportunities. And so that faculty and researchers can just continue to make the discoveries that, to help us better understand our universe and solve the world's biggest problems. So one of our goals at Matimco, and this is a map from Tableau, one of our goals at Matimco is to cultivate an innovation ecosystem in Kendall Square, Cambridge, the home of MIT. At the same time, we also want to engage and foster that larger community that MIT is part of. So the residents of Cambridge, the students, faculty, and staff of MIT, and their friends and families, and everyone else who works in the city or visits the city. And one of the ways that we do that is through our real estate department, whose data and processes I supported as an analyst. So not only do we build buildings, bringing biotech, tough tech, and other companies and their people to the area, and yes, those are actually Lego models of some of the buildings we built up. And that background is a Lego mosaic that we had kids and adults who visited the Cambridge Science Festival build out, and then the rest of the Matimco staff finished up the rest of it. So like I got to actually put a whole bunch of those one by one Lego pieces into that wall behind the models. Anyway, so we build these buildings, we bring these companies to the area, but we also want to bring in retail and community spaces to make Kendall Square just come alive. We want it to be a place where people actually want to gather. And I see Jen Kamato in the audience right now. Jen is I want to say recent graduate, I'm guessing recent graduate or soon to be graduate from Northeastern. And Jen recently presented at a Boston Tableau user group here at MIT. We co-hosted, and she did an amazing. She graduates in May. She did an amazing presentation and a deep dive. So go check out her Tableau Public because there's a really great Tableau viz that takes you through a bunch of different ways to look at, oh my God, I'm forgetting now what it was. Was it parameters? Parameters and collapsible hierarchies and things. It was amazing. Anyway, Jane and others, we want them to gather here in Cambridge. And so, there's things that we do. So in the summer of 2024, for example, we hosted a pop-up roller rink in what was once a parking lot. So yeah, our roller skating rink, like back in the 80s, but it was outside. We called it Rollerama at Kendall Common. There's a local artist named Messiel Groulant who we're bringing in the community. And Messiel designed this amazing swirl mural. Because I'm a data nerd, I call it a swanky sanky because it kind of has all those swirls that kind of connect. And Messiel got all of her local artist friends to help kind of put it in action. You can see them actually painting the blacktop right there. So we had live music, we had free skate rentals, we had learn and skate events, all this amazing stuff that you need to just have fun. And all of it was free and it was open to the public. There were separate food and beverage concessions by local companies, and we got to raise money. Drill downs. Yes, it was drill downs. Sorry. And we got to raise money for local nonprofits in Cambridge. So as Matimco employees, we got to test drive the roller rink at a friends and family event the day before it officially opened. And, I skated right over. This picture actually is from our the offices of the Matimco or window of the Matimco office. So that first day, we took the Rollerama for our test guide. We made sure that the liability waivers worked, key. We checked out the skate rentals. We celebrated the work that our colleagues had done to just get the space rolling. And, as far as skating went, it was pretty good. I was a little shaky, but I didn't fall, so I considered it a win. The next day, we had some interns. It was a Friday afternoon. The interns were like, hey, you want to go skating? And I was like, hey, yes, I do. So, of course, I went back. So, again, I was a little shaky on the skates, but going around basic loops was no problem. And I was like, we were all having a blast, right? And then there was a point where I lost my balance and I fell. My glasses fell off my head. They like seriously flipped over my head. I used my hand to catch my fall. And so I had a little scrape on my palm, but we all came out of that pretty unscathed. I got back up and kept skating. And then a little while later, I fell again. Used the same exact hand to catch my fall. My glasses, they stayed on this time. I was like, score, not spending $300 on new glasses. But everything did not feel okay. And so I had to coast on out of there and hang up my skates. Well, actually, the office dino, Cyrus, who's actually standing in my skates about 3 feet away, he kind of stole them. All right, so I thought maybe I just sprained my wrist. A little rest, no knitting, a little ice, a little compression and stabilizing with a wrist brace, a little elevation, rice. Everything would be fine in a couple days, right? Well, it was and it wasn't. A few days roll by, the initial hurt and swelling is gone, but in its place is a very different kind of hurt. I was having trouble with little things like turning the handles on sink faucets and the doorknob on my front door. It hurt when I tried to squeeze water out of the sponge after washing dishes. Oops. And if I tried to stir anything, just forget about it. Like, I am a lefty. The hurt wrist was my left wrist. And so anything I really tried to do, or, it just hurt. So a trip to MIT Health, some x-rays, and I learned that I had fractured my wrist. You can barely see it in this x-ray. You have to zoom way, way in, but you can see there's some tiny, tiny, tiny little bone shards, enough to make it hurt. I call them bone pebbles, but that's just because I watch too much Flintstones. Anyway, though there was no surgery, I was stuck in a wrist brace for basically the rest of the summer. I was medically cleared to do just about everything, but I had to wear the wrist brace all the time. So I learned a couple of things from this experience. First, most importantly, listen to Mariah. So I don't know how many of you remember that 1995 music video for Fantasy, the one with ODB saying he and Mariah go back like babies with pacifiers. Well, what exactly is Mariah wearing while she rolls blades around the amusement park? That's right. I see wrist guards. I see knee pads, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were elbow pads under the hoodie. And I'm just gonna do a little side note. Mariah apparently directed that video. I didn't learn that until recently. Anyway, so got wrist pads and knee pads and elbow pads. I talked to my orthopedist, after all this injury nonsense, and he said I could continue skating as long as I also wore wrist guards and knee pads. And sure enough, 3 feet away from Cyrus, the dinosaur who stole my skates, in my file cabinet is a pile of wrist guards and knee pads and even elbow pads. My orthopedist also said that if I do fall again, whether it's because of wheels or not, instead of putting my hand out to catch myself, I should tuck and roll. So that's right, folks. Tuck and roll. Keep those arms in. Do not use them to catch your fall. And I have attempted to use that method recently. I will add that you should also make sure that if you are trying to tuck and roll, that your biking gloves aren't so big that they get stuck between the handlebar and the brake lever. Whole different injury, still recovering. Anyway, another thing that I learned is that door levers reign supreme. So those faucets and doorknobs that hurt to turn, they looked a lot like this. I had to grip the knob and then turn my wrist. And again, I'm a lefty. My go-to hand for gripping and turning those faucets and doorknobs is going to be my left hand, the one that's attached to the fractured wrist. Fortunately, all the interior doors at my house, they have levers because levers are just so much easier to deal with. If you're carrying laundry or groceries or just moving things from one room to another, they simply require a press. There's no gripping, there's no turning. They don't even require hands. There's one door in particular at Matimco that I would usually open while carrying a mug of tea in one hand and a laptop in the other hand. And, whichever elbow is closer to the door, that's the elbow that pressed down on the lever. And while I was wearing the wrist brace, I could really just lean the braced forearm on the lever and voila, the door open. So while my wrist fracture healed, I had a partial temporary impairment, a disability with a lowercase d. That's That summer, I did not have the same range of motion, the same abilities as uninjured, klutzy, but relatively able-bodied me. And that experience made me realize that some of the examples of universal design, they're just all around me, right? Door levers are a great example. Though they are required in many buildings by the ADA or Americans with Disabilities Act, they're universally usable regardless of ability, and they require no need for adaptation or specialized design. They promote equitable use. Anyone can use them, and I'm seeing some comments in the chat that supports this. So anyone can use them, whether or without a disability. Kids with tiny hands have an easier time with levers and doorknobs, as do those with arthritis or other disabilities gripping with their hands or turning their wrists, as do pets like cats and dogs who can just paw at them and magic the doors open. They're flexible. You can use them right-handed or left-handed. You can use any method to open them, your hand, your forearm, your elbow, your knee, your laptop, the bottom of your very full mug of tea, or, your pet can use their paws. They're simple and they're intuitive to use. It's easy to perceive them and understand how they're supposed to function. They're easy to operate. They require very little physical effort, and they're usually big enough and at the right level for most people who are attempting to open a door to actually use them, right? So these 7 universal design principles were developed by a working group of architects, product designers, engineers, and environmental design researchers led by Ronald Mace at the North Carolina State University. And they can be used to evaluate existing designs, to guide the design process, and to educate both designers and consumers, and we're consumers here and also designers, about what makes usable products and environments more usable. And though I may not call them out here, we are going to see them in action throughout the talk. So curb cuts are another example of design intended to provide access to users with disabilities, but they can be usable by all. So let's look at these 2 curb cuts. One of them is taken from right outside the MIT Data Center, that funny looking building in the background. The other is from closer to where you all are in Texas, to my mom's neighborhood. So you can see from these sidewalks, like the curb cut really just makes it easier to go up and down from the sidewalk to the street and vice versa. There's just no steps involved. So with a curb cut, people and dinosaurs in a wheelchair or using a motorized mobility device or even a walker are provided a safe way to get to street level so that they can cross the street and get where they need to go. And in riding my bike around and walking around Cambridge over the last few years, I've seen lots of instances where curb cuts were helpful for those without visible mobility issues, like the 4-year-old on a scooter followed by a lady pushing a stroller, or the delivery driver with a heavily loaded hand truck trying to make a drop off. Or the couple walking their teeny tiny dog, not to scale here, that could barely reach the top of the curb, but could very easily walk up and down the curb cut. Or the person with a foldable shopping cart who's going on a grocery run. Not to mention the couple times that I've walked my bike across the street when walking with friends. So, in fact, if you're going to Tableau conference in 2026 in San Diego in May, I'm going to guess you're probably also going to use curb cuts with your wheelie luggage. And side note, because I am full of tangents, my first TC was actually back in 2016, which was in Austin. And I did indeed use wheelie luggage, and I'm sure I used some curb cuts. And while I learned a whole lot by attending every hands-on session I could at TC, my favorite memory actually has nothing to do with TC, but instead it's about something that is so very Austin. So instead of, it involved seeing a stuffed Alf doll. Yes, like Alf, the furry red alien life form from the TV show in the late 80s, early 90s. The stuffed Alf was just sitting out on the porch of a house in SoCo, somewhere between my hotel, which was right across the street from a Denny's, because there are no Denny's here in Boston. There are many Denny's in Texas. Between between my hotel and the conference venue. So every time I think about Austin, I first think of the stuffed Alf that sits on a porch or sat on a porch, probably rain damaged by now, 10 years ago. Anyway, so who uses curb cuts anyway? This curb cut effect, the phenomenon where a much larger population benefits from the positive externalities of something that's just designed to help users with disabilities, it's something that we see all over our lives. So who uses speech to text to send text messages, or text to speech to hear messages via Bluetooth in their car? How many folks turn on closed captioning on their TVs, or these days on their mobile devices when they're, listening to something in a loud environment or watching something in a loud environment? All of this technology was designed to improve accessibility for those with disabilities, but it has a much larger or broader use. So many of these innovations were designed for disability first. Universal design goes a step further, though, and posits that our goal isn't to design for the exception or the disability or the other. Rather, we should design more inclusively with an eye to remove barriers for everyone from the outset. So build to address a larger range of abilities rather than to solve for specific disability. The challenge, however, is that sometimes universal design isn't going to work for everyone. And Ron Mace's original name for this movement was barrier-free design. So sometimes the truly accessible design isn't a this instead, but rather it should be a yes and. So here we have the stairs, but we've removed the barrier by adding a ramp. The stairs, they're quicker, but the ramp, it provides access. It is slow, and it's the long way to get in the building, but getting into the building is better than not having access at all. And in fact, I actually spy a second set of stairs here, and we'll come back to that later. So how does all of that apply to presenting data? We're going to get there. We're taking the ramp, though. But first, let's count our steps. So some of you might have seen a demo like this before, and I'm adapting it from where I first saw it. It's in one of Colin Ware's books, Information Visualization Perception for Design. And I'm going to preface this with, I'm going to be asking you guys to put a whole bunch of things in the chat. So get ready, get those keyboards ready, because you're on the spot now. So how many 8s do you see in the rainbow frame here? I'm seeing no answers in the chat. Okay, I see an 8, and it is in fact 8. So it probably took a lot of scanning through every row and column to count the 8s. Our message here is that it's really hard to find a data point in a sea of sameness. So next question, how many 6s? All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Every 6 here is a darker shade or color intensity than the non-6s. How many 7s? So 3. That was probably also very easy because the 7s are in a different color. The different color or hue makes the data pop. And color, it matters. How many 5s? That's right. I'm seeing no answers. Why? Because in order to get this, you have to scan the entire thing. And there are 3. But this rainbow of colors, it's not providing any help here, but I can guarantee you have probably each, and I have also done this, put together a visualization that uses every color in the rainbow. It's not really helpful. So how many 3s do you see here? Yep, there are 8. So the data point we're looking for here is bigger than all of the others. So increasing the relative size of something can make it easier to see. In other words, size matters. How many zeros do you see here? I'm seeing a bunch of 9s, and there are indeed 9. They're probably relatively easy to see because they had some added weight to them. So making a number bolder makes it pop. How many 9s? Okay, 11. This is the largest number so far. And even though it might have taken a while to count them, they were probably amongst the easiest to see. Why is that? Because we've compounded some of the features that we've already seen. They're bigger, they're bolder, and they're in Technicolor. Shape is another feature that can make a mark pop. It can be combined with other colors, with colors or other attributes. But when a shape and color mean 2 different things, that interplay can have some unintended consequences. So here you might have gotten thrown off a little bit by the non-orange circles. An object's position with respect to others can make it more salient, like these 2s that are offset from other marks. So can enclosures like this and grouping like this. All of these features that we've seen are called pre-attentive attributes, and they contribute to what Colin Ware calls the pop-out effect. When they're used thoughtfully, a combination of pre-attentive attributes can make certain marks or annotations more salient than others. In other words, they help things stand out or pop out. So visualization research has demonstrated that certain features are more effective than others at conveying information. They have more of a pop-out effect. And some are more expressive. They're better suited to express a specific type of data attribute. So if you want to use color to show quantity, you wouldn't use random colors like the categorical ones on the right. Guilty here. I've done that so many times. It's wrong, I know. Instead, you'd want to use the gradient, a gradient of the same hue, like on the left here. So you want to let these ideas of expressiveness and effectiveness color your approach as we go to apply pre-attentive attributes in our work. So, speaking of colors, and speaking of work, when I visit my mom's house, this is what my remote work setup looks like. So I've got a laptop on the bottom left, it's plugged into a larger monitor above it, and a portable monitor on the right. And all of these screens are supposed to be showing the exact same orange background. Clearly, they don't. Cyndi Lauper, there's no true color shining through here. That's even apparent when you look at a dashboard on the setup. So here's Andy Kriebel's visual vocabulary, the deviation tab. And I do love me a diverging stacked bar chart. So let's look at that. So what on earth is happening here? So the orange bars, disagree and strongly disagree, are pretty distinguishable from all the others on all 3 of these screens, right? The dark blue, strongly agree, is also pretty solid. But the gray, which is neutral, and the light blue, agree, are only really easily distinguishable on the external monitor. On the laptop, they're a little hard to tell apart, and on the portable monitor on the bottom right, not even gonna try. So are my eyes just playing tricks on me? Sometimes I experience a similar effect in most of the conference rooms in, everywhere I go, really, in my office, when I've been to conferences even. And so here's one of our larger rooms. It happens to be in the corner of the building, and that means there's lots of windows. So there's a projector on the ceiling that projects onto a screen in front of one bay of windows. There's one on the wall across from another bay of windows, or there's a monitor on the wall. And then crudely drawn in here, because I forgot to take a picture with the laptop in place, that's where my laptop is sitting in the pictures we're going to see in a couple minutes. It's directly under and in front of and centered under the monitor. So under ideal conditions, the shades on the windows are pulled down all the way, the lights are turned off, and all 3 screens actually show sufficient contrast between the colors. I can actually distinguish between the blue and the light gray on all of these screens. And if you zoom in on that stacked bar chart, this is what it looks like. I mean, yes, the colors do look slightly different on each screen, but I can still see that contrast. There are 5 distinct shades on each of these on each of these screens. And I've been in this room for meetings well over 100 times, and of all those meetings, I can guarantee you that I have never been in there when the shades were drawn and the lights were off, except of course when I was taking these pictures. So usually the shades are up, at least partially, if not fully. And on an overcast day or a cloudy day, this is what happens. The projector is washed out. The distinction between gray and light blue is just a little harder to see. If it's even partially sunny, that projector is just complete toast. And my laptop monitor actually doesn't do much better. Only the monitor that was on the wall seems to show the colors distinct enough from each other for folks to see. And if we turn on the lights, the projector still lost cause. My laptop screen, it's a little bit better, but only when the light blue bar is long enough. So on the bottom bar where that light blue is super short, I have to zoom way in on my laptop to see where it meets the gray. And then going back to the monitor, again, it's pretty clear. That said, you can see a little glimmer of glare on the second bar, the good job skills bar. So depending on where you're sitting, the monitor might actually have a glare from the lights. All of these pictures were taken from straight on. So if I were viewing any of the screens from an angle, probably would have made the contrast harder to see. And every single one of us sees these temporary blips in our vision. So like imagine you're walking out of your building into full light, probably have to increase the brightness on your phone screen. So these temporary situational vision deficiencies, they're not the only ones that humans experience. You've probably all heard of color blindness. That's a permanent, often genetic color vision deficiency where a person has decreased or no ability to discriminate between certain colors. I've used Coblis, the color blindness simulator here, to show what that diverging bar chart looks like under different types of color blindness. Variations of red and green, the first full row of images simulated here, are the most common. But what matters is not necessarily the actual color that you're seeing or that whoever is, looking at these screens is seeing, but something I mentioned a few times earlier, the amount of contrast between colors. So what is the right amount of contrast to make colors in your vizzes universally or almost universally distinguishable? Well, the fine folks at the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, have developed standards called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, my favorite acronym. These guidelines state that an accessible website must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And what are Tableau dashboards but fancy web pages? So, what do the WCAG standards say about the perceivability of color contrast? For normal text, I'm going to just say this out. Let's just pretend that it's 18 point. In none of the WCAG standards does it actually call out a specific like text size, simply because the assumption is that your end users will be able to zoom in and out. But if you're just looking at something on your computer screen, let's just say normal text is 18 point font. The color contrast ratio between text color and background color at 18 points should be at least 4.5 to 1. And as the text gets larger, the contrast ratio can get smaller, so 3.3 to 1 at a minimum. Just like that zoom effect we saw on the bottom bar earlier, like as the bar got bigger, the contrast was easier to see. So for non-text elements, those bars, the actual bars in the diverging bar chart, it should also be 3 to 1. So how do you calculate color contrast? I have no idea. I use a color contrast checker like this one from webaim.org. So this excerpt from a chart is another one of the inspirations for this presentation. So back in, I don't know, late 2022, a Matimco staff member was sharing this slide that was presented to the board. They were talking about the red dots, but then joked, well, they couldn't actually see which dots were red versus blue. And I was like, what the heck? Like, why did we keep this chart the way that it is if you can't tell the difference and you're the one presenting on it? And, I ran the colors through a color contrast checker, and yeah, they're hard to distinguish because there's just no contrast there. 1.34 to 1 is not anywhere near 3 to 1, which is the minimum before. So color contrast checking isn't, I've done it before my job at Matimco. So when I worked in MIT's central fundraising department, I was tasked with building out a style guide for Tableau. And one of the elements in that style guide was determining what colors do we use to highlight content in tooltips. So you don't want just like white and black text. Like sure, you can use bold or other formatting to like highlight something, but color can really make something pop, as we learned earlier. So we decided we're going to test MIT colors. So cardinal red and a variety of grays, along with Tableau's default orange and blue. We're going to test them against a white background and a black background. And what did we learn from the color contrast test? Well, I'm going to call out the easiest option that passed was Tableau's default blue against a white background. So we tried it. This is what one of those tooltips looked like. We did some usability testing, and you know what else is blue and text on the web? Links. And sure enough, we saw users see this blue text and try to click on it and not be able to click on it. And I did a huge facepalm at that. Like, I was like, oh, well, yeah, that was dumb of me. I was so stuck on those color contrast ratios and using what I thought was the easiest, meaning no custom color palette option, that I completely missed something that's so glaringly obvious. Blue text on the web is going to be a link, or people are going to think it's a link. So forget color vision deficiencies. I had tunnel vision deficiency here. The other color that did pass all the tests at all the levels, was MIT red. It did require adding that color to our color palettes, which, let's be honest, we were going to add MIT colors to our color palette anyway. But it was great to see that both from color contrast ratio checking and usability testing that MIT red with for text highlights against a white background was the right choice. And because I don't do anything unless it's extra, well, that we also ran those colors through the Codeless color blindness simulator and then used those simulated colors and put them through the color contrast checker. And this two-step process ensured that not only did we have enough color contrast for users with normal vision, but also for most users with color vision deficiencies. So if you've gone through this exercise and ensured that the colors you're using have sufficient contrast, what do you do next? How do you make them reusable? Tableau lets you store custom color palettes in a preferences.tps file in your Tableau repository. You can then share that file with others in your organization to ensure that you're all using the same accessible color palettes. Creating that file does require knowing some XML, and while there have been some improvements in 2025.3, it now has a color palette tool built in. It looks promising. This tool right here, the the color manager for Tableau by Alex Wletzek. He's a Kiwi Tableau ambassador. This tool is, oh my God, amazing. It is so very fully featured. It helps you generate and update your preferences.tps file simply by dragging and dropping. You can copy and paste colors from your brand website, for example. You don't have to be careful about only including the hex codes. You can just like copy the entire page, throw them in the text box, and the script will pull out just the colors that are in there. And then you can create categorical and gradient palettes based on those colors, and it's amazing. All with copying and pasting and a little bit of clicking. It's a huge time saver. Okay, so let's say you want to create custom palettes, but you can't, and you have to stick to a colorblind palette, or you have to provide a colorblind palette. Well, one thing that you can do is you can actually provide both the normal brand accepted palette, but also provide users who need a higher contrast or colorblind friendly palette another option through a simple user operated color palette switcher. So this is a ramp in addition to the stairs. So Andy Kriebel put together this super short video on it. It's 3 steps. And for step 1 is you create a Boolean parameter. Step 2 is that you add it to the mark shelf and switch it to color. And step 3, you assign a colorblind friendly palette. So one of those defaults that's available in Tableau. And so far, we've looked purely at color. What about when we start mixing it up with other attributes? If you look at the line charts here, that top line chart, somewhere in this chart, anytime like the blue and the green get close to each other, I stop being able to distinguish between them. I'm not colorblind, like not officially colorblind, but every one of us has things that we can and cannot see well. And this is one of those cases for me. So if you look in the bottom chart, I've added shape on each line to make it easier to differentiate between central and west, for example. So like I can tell when the circle is a circle and a star is a star. It's really hard to mix up those two things if you know what those shapes are. But it is compared to how easy it can be to mix up the colors when they're close to each other. And if you go back to that example from the Matimco staff meeting, remember that the blue and red dots? Like if we had just replaced the red dots with red stars, that whole low color contrast thing wouldn't even have been an issue, because it could have been, if you look at the red stars, you can look at the red if you know red, or you can look at the star piece. Like the red stars are very different from the blue dots. So here are some toggles. The type I see most in the wild, are not just in Tableau workbooks, are the pair on the left. It's just a toggle switch with a difference in color to presumably show on versus off. And every time I look at a toggle like this, I still need to think through, wait, is this on or is it off? And it's really bad on my phone because I use dark mode on my phone, and those colors just do not translate in dark mode. So I always end up having to click a few times to figure out whether something is on or off. And you know what can really help? Adding a shape or words to differentiate. So the meaning here, like if the check is there, it means it's on. Great. And if it says it's off, wonderful. It's relatively unambiguous and clear. And these 2 examples demonstrate a WCAG principle around the use of color, basically that it shouldn't be the only way that you convey a particular piece of information. And not everyone sees colors. Not everyone sees colors the same way. And the same person may not even see color the same way depending on all the conditions that they're in, right? The lighting, device they're using, or other situational or environmental elements. So adding that extra context through shape or size or text, whatever you need to do to reinforce what you're trying to convey through color, we call this reinforcement double encoding or multiple encoding. This reinforcement really has the potential to help all of your users. And when combining with shape and color, you do want to be careful. So here we've applied color and shape to show different attributes of the same data. Different attributes. Different attributes, different elements. That means we're actually multiplying the number of options that someone has to keep track of. And it can make a chart even more confusing. So don't mix your encodings. And finally, one more thing. Be consistent. If you're using color to highlight a certain type of 80s leg accessory like slouch socks, don't do it consistently. So don't use orange to highlight slouch socks on one chart and leg warmers in red on that same chart, and then switch it in the next chart. Just don't do it. All right. And with that, we're done with color. So let's glide on over to size. And I'm gonna get real here, folks. Size really does matter for your Tableau dashboards. So this is a very important page of the Tableau documentation. I don't actually want you to read this. Instead, I want you to look at the screen and squint. That's like scrunch up your eyes really small and stare at the screen. What do you see? What stands out? All right, you can stop squinting. Does this look a little like what you saw when you squinted? What we just did was a squint test. The squint test is a design trick that helps you get an idea of how elements on your screen are grouped and helps you understand the visual hierarchy on the page. So the big things, the headers, are what's emphasized. Everything that got a little blurry, not so much. So here's the Tableau user groups homepage, or usergroups.tableau.com. You all went there to get to this meeting. You should all go back there and make sure you join other communities, other user groups that you're potentially interested in. Since I am a Tableau ambassador, I kind of have to do this, and I actually all want to do this. So there is a Tableau user group for everyone. And if there isn't, you can start one. So Colin Smith and Emily Kuhn, for example, started the accessibility tag a couple years ago because there was a need. People weren't really talking about accessibility in Tableau. And if you want to learn more about user groups, just again, go to usergroups.tableau.com. You can also DM me on the Tableau community Slack that Homer talked about earlier. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program. I want you to try the squint test again. So ready, set, squint. All right, you can stop squinting. It probably looked a little like this. So again, big letters all big and bold. And the surprise here is that this image also popped. And images can be a really great tool, but they can also steal attention, especially when they are so big. Here, it's effective, but on a viz, it really depends. And in a viz, there might be additional accessibility concerns that you need to be aware of. So speaking of a viz, let's try the squint test here. This is, again, deviation tab of Andy Kriebel's visual vocabulary. So go ahead and squint. All right, here's what that probably looked like. Again, we've got headers. So let's talk about what headers. WCAG has a couple of guidelines on headings. Basically, you should have them, and they should help you describe a topic or purpose or organize content. Seems simple enough, so how do you make that happen? First, we want to use typography to set up a visual hierarchy. The Big Book of Dashboards says that you should have 3 levels of font size, types and sizes, top level, mid level, and low level, to help you just see how the viz is organized and help them understand the relative importance of and the relationship between the elements on the dashboard. So this font hierarchy is something you're probably already familiar with from presentation tools. So the slide title here is top level font. The top text level is mid-level font, and basically everything else is low level font. So how does this 3-level hierarchy apply to the deviation dashboard? Deviation, the dashboard title is top level font. The individual chart or view titles are mid-level fonts, and then everything else is low level. So Tableau has workbook settings, which you can use, we get to via the format menu and then workbook. So deviation, your top level font should be tied to your dashboard titles font, and you should adjust that up or down as needed. Chart titles, your mid-level font, should be tied to your worksheet titles font. And everything else, that low-level font, should be tied to worksheets. So let's say you found a combination of fonts that you like and that test well with users, and you want to reuse and maybe share those fonts with others on your team, and you want to build out, a consistent and usable template. In 2025.1, Tableau introduced a new custom themes feature. You set your settings via the format menu like we just saw, and then you go back to that format menu and export the custom theme. That generates a JSON file, which you can edit if you know JSON. And then when you want to use your custom theme, you import it again in the format menu. Because the styles are in that JSON file, you can then also share that JSON file with others on your team. If you want to make edits, but you also want to do it more graphically, that's where the custom theme generator developed by La Data Viz, aka Tristan Gullivan and Jessica Bautista, both Tableau ambassadors and/or visionaries, that's when this tool comes into play. It's a free tool and allows you to generate new custom themes as well as import and tweak an existing one. And if being able to set all your viz styles easily and isn't enough, I want to make one more plug for an accessibility feature that's really easy to overlook, but that can be key to helping low or no vision users see the visual hierarchy of your viz. So WCAG recommends that the structure of a document, the relationship between the parts of a dashboard, be programmatically determined or available in text. So how do you structure or ensure the structure is apparent in Tableau? Simply put, you use the built-in dashboard and view tiles instead of using text boxes or creating dummy sheets for dynamic titles. Now, I am, again, super guilty of creating these dummy text boxes or sheets instead of using the default titles. So why exactly is it important to use the defaults? Screen readers. So a screen reader is assistive technology that literally reads out loud what's on the screen for users who have low or no vision. So they use a keyboard to navigate, they use tab, enter, arrow keys, etc., to access the different parts of the page, or in our case, of the dashboard. So when a screen reader sees a standalone text box or dummy, no content view that's used as a dynamic title, it reads the title, department, and that's it. Not very helpful to the user. So compare it to what happens when you use the worksheet title. Then the screen reader reads the title department, and it also sees that it's structurally related to the chart. So then goes on to read the chart for the consumer. So department, data visualization, bar chart of blah, blah, blah. Those structural elements in Tableau, they convey information, they convey structure, relationships, all of what is recommended by WCAG. So I want to take a little minute to talk about screen readers. So question to the audience, who actually has used a screen reader? Go ahead and put the name of any screen readers you've used in the chat. I see one for JAWS, and that might be it. So the WebAIM, the same folks behind my go-to color contrast checker, they did a survey back in 2024 of screen reader users. They do an annual or an annual biannual, something like that survey. And here are the results. So I'm a Windows user, and Windows has Narrator built in. It is complete trash. When I tried it with Tableau Public and Tableau Server on Windows 10 and 11 in the browser, like it picked up almost nothing. And given that experience, I haven't really tried it with any other tools. I just moved on to alternatives. So the alternatives for Windows include a free tool called NVDA, which stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access. Again, it's free. It is my go-to on Windows because it is free, and we're going to see it in action in a moment. There's a couple of other tools out there like JAWS, Job Access with Speech, and Zoom Text. They do have a little bit of a cost. It's been a while since I've used either, but they are quite popular, especially in higher education institutions. If you're not a Windows user, VoiceOver is the built-in screen reader for Mac OS and iOS devices. Orca is a common one on Linux, and a lot of browsers have extensions that also do screen reading. And I personally don't have experience with any of these other tools other than NVDA, JAWS, and Zoom Text, but I have heard good things about VoiceOver and about some of the built-in extensions. And we're going to see in a second what it actually sounds like when you use a screen reader with that example I showed earlier. So here is where department is a standalone text box.
University space used analysis. Depart visualization controls toolbar undo button redo button unavail department.
That's it, department. I'll try clicking on this.
Department.
I'll try to navigate, but all I hear is department. So I tried to tab over to get from the title to
navigation
the
landmark
okay.
application.
It just moved on to the next object, which is completely different. So now this is what you hear when you actually use a built-in sheet title.
Application, department. Data visualization. Bar chart of area department / use type, color applied to it.
So I can tab from the title directly into the chart. And while the actual description of the chart is going to be very rough, I didn't play it all, it still connects the title to the chart, and that's really important. And that connection, I'll show you a way in a little bit to actually fix the chart description. So it's a little, not only is it connected, but it's actually connected in a way that provides useful information, not bar chart of blah, blah, blah. All right, so let's go back to size. Take a look at these two charts. Would you believe me that the only difference between them is the size of the shape? If I were to tell you there's a tooltip on the red mark at the top, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to want to use the chart that's on the left, not the one on the right, the one with the bigger dots. Why? Because it's bigger, because the shape is easier to see, it's clearer, you're going to be able to hover over it more successfully. Now, I'm going to guess that many of you use a Bluetooth mouse instead of like the trackpad or touchpad that's built into your laptop. Now, if I told you were at a conference, maybe Tableau Conference 2026 in San Diego in May, if I told you that your mouse battery died, you don't have a spare, you have to use the touchpad. It's probably going to be a little bit of an awful experience for you. Just guessing. It'll be annoying because you don't have the same motor control that you normally have with your external mouse. So marks and buttons and controls, like filters, they're all interactive elements that you need to be able to point to hover over, to click on. But if that interactive element is too small for you to use effectively, if the target of your interaction is too small, that becomes a problem. So fortunately, marks tend to have a little bit of an extra halo around them, so this specific scenario isn't as bad as it seems. But if you talk about buttons and controls, that can be problematic. Fortunately, WCAG has some guidelines around things that need to be pointed to. They say the target size of an interaction should be a minimum of 24 by 24 pixels. The enhanced guideline, the one that I have highlighted here, which makes websites more usable on touch devices like your phone or tablet, or even a touch screen on a laptop. My mom, huge touch screen, like laptop touchscreen fan. I don't get it. Anyway, for those touch devices, 44 by 44 pixels. So I'm going to make folks do a little bit of math. How much larger is the enhance button than the minimum? I'm seeing no answers in the chat, but that's okay because this is math. 3x. 3x is close. It's 3.36 times larger. So for folks who have difficulty moving the mouse or who are using a touch device, that extra bit of space, it's not just a little bit of space, it's a good chunk of space. That extra space of the enhanced standard is a very welcome change. So the good news is that by default, navigation buttons in Tableau are 52 pixels high. Amazing. Show hide buttons are 24 by 24 pixels, which can, again, be a little harder to use on touch devices. So for those and for any other custom buttons that you might create, including ones that you create from a shape, like if you're using a chart to filter another chart, try to make them 44 by 44 pixels, or make the clickable space 44 by 44 pixels, because that will make the button or the link or whatever clickable target big enough to be usable on more devices and by more users. And that's beginning to sound a lot like universal design. So that's enough on size. Learn to use our words. So first, let's talk about icons. One of my favorite features when it was first released in Tableau was show hide buttons on layout containers. And the ability to let users show or hide extra but still helpful information, but still make better use of the larger screen real estate, I thought it was amazing. So when I worked in fundraising the first time around, we tried to implement it on a dashboard that had a lot of filters that people mostly weren't going to use, we hoped. We thought they would set their initial settings and then they would be done with the filters. So we used a simple funnel icon, very similar to what you see in Excel. And, we thought it said, hey, here's the filters, go use them when you need them. So we thought it'd be enough, but during usability testing this dashboard, we found out it wasn't. Users really didn't seem to get what the icon meant. So we changed tracks completely and we went to the all words option. Again, users either missed it or they didn't know what filters meant in the context. And we came away thinking we weren't using the correct words for them, even though we thought it was filters. So we changed tracks completely again, and we went to this wrench and sprocket design with words show settings. So words and an icon. Well, good news, people saw it. Bad news, they thought it wasn't for them. The gear made them think it was more like iPhone settings, so Tableau app settings, not the filters that they would use for this dashboard. The really good part that did come out of those discussions is that we discovered, well, filters actually was the right word in the first place. So we settled on this version. It has a filter and a sort icon similar to Excel, has the word show filters, and in testing, people got it. The icon was familiar, the words were clear. Whew, hallelujah. So we learned that using an icon alone presented an issue with understanding. So what the heck does this icon mean? What happens if I click here? The small amount of text that you have room for on a neat little button, it may not be enough for the context that the user needs to know with certainty what's going to happen if they click on the button. And that's where providing a text alternative for a button is key to improving usability and accessibility. So do I have to say the words? Yeah, Brian Adams, you do. So the good news is buttons in Tableau have tooltips. So when you go to edit a show hide button, you have this option to update the tooltip. So when you hover, show buildings appears. The accessibility win here is that tooltips and buttons are also screen reader accessible. So that additional context that you've created for sighted users is also usable by low or no vision users. These tooltips are a universal design win. You're adding extra context that happens to help all of your users navigate. And when I started looking at this University Space Use Analysis workbook from Tableau Public to find examples for this presentation, there's this little orange mouse icon that I've highlighted here on the right. It's on this thing 3 times. I missed it every time. All but one. I missed all but one of those. And I really thought it was a show hide button. The entire time I was like playing around with this, I was like, show hide button, great. But I clicked it and nothing happened. So I ended up opening up the workbook to investigate and I realized, well, it's not a show hide icon. It's an image. There's just no words here. None. So I was a little slow to notice that there's also this gray crossed out version of the exact same icon that appears twice on the dashboard. And it took me way too long. I mean, I'm a seasoned computer user. I've been using computers since I was like 4 or 5. And most of the time it was, graphical interfaces. Like I missed that this was actually telling me whether a chart was interactive or not. Now imagine if all I could see that this thing was an image. I had no idea what the image was, like why it was there. You had no ability to distinguish between the orange version and the gray version. And that's what happens when you use a screen reader on an image in Tableau. That is, unless you add alt text. So when you add alt text to an image, you can provide users that use screen readers information about what's in the image. Is it purely decorative or does it serve a purpose? So adding a description of the image, if applicable, and more importantly, the purpose it serves provides key information to users who cannot see the image or cannot see it well. And alt text actually goes beyond images in Tableau, which is amazing. You can now add alt text to view. So if you right click on a worksheet on a dashboard or go to the worksheet menu, you'll see this accessibility option. So Tableau generates alt text for you. It's actually the same exact text as the automatic caption that you may already be familiar with. And as with captions, you can edit the alt text to make it more useful and informative because bar chart, area of department / use type, blah, 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 blah. It's not all that useful. And if what I read out loud sounded a little familiar, it should be. It's the exact same thing that the screen reader demo was starting to say. And this is where, if I promised earlier, I'd tell you here's where you can fix that word salad. This is it. This updating the accessibility text will update what shows what is read out loud by the screen reader. And in case you missed it, the extra bonus here is that alt text is actually screen reader accessible out of the box. So with captions, the caption actually has to be visible on the dashboard in order for a screen reader to make use of it. And when you add a whole bunch of text to your dashboard, it can feel like for your sighted users, all of that text is just clutter, clutter, clutter. It's overwhelming. They don't want to see it. With alt text, that description, it's hidden. It's hidden. You're reducing potential clutter on the dashboard. Oh, hold on, wait. You say alt text is hidden from users using a screen reader? Yeah, that's right, Cyrus. Sometimes things aren't built for everyone, and that is okay. Yes, Lego Cyrus. Yes, the Lego version of Cyrus. Lego Cyrus, I am supposed to be talking about universal design. That is right. I'm supposed to be talking about how to build something for everyone. Whew, thank goodness Flex has my back. There's this additional feature that can be used alongside alt text that is usable without a screen reader, the data guide. And Melismata, I heard data too. And please note, Melismata's name does not rhyme with data or data. It is inspired by Mariah. But Melismata is sassy, and I can guarantee she has opinions on how data is said. Anyway, let's come back from this tangent. So in Tableau Server and on the cloud, there's this button at the top right that looks like a signpost. It's the data guide. So click on it. When you have a viz selected, the top portion includes details about the viz. So a description, optional links, resources, all that stuff. Whatever you want to put in there, a video on how to use the dashboard, a link to documentation in your knowledge base. When you don't have a viz selected, it shows that same sort of information for the dashboard, and even more optional links if you choose to put them there. So how do you get to it? How do you update what's in the data guide? In desktop, there's a same little signpost that lets you edit the data guide. So you can do that both on the dashboard side or on the viz. And when you're on the viz, you also can see what the accessibility text is. So you can go ahead from the same place, you can update the viz description and the accessibility text to be identical so that both your sighted users and your low or no vision users get the same exact content. So we've seen the case where accessible design means extra steps. But what about these extra steps I talked about in the barrier-free environment sketch? Those steps are a way for more able-bodied people to get to another level of the building, but they aren't for those with some mobility issues. And Tableau has a little bit of that too. So Tableau tooltips have had a little bit of a rocky start with accessibility. Viz and tooltips are my favorite. They help you put a lot of really cool information and easy to digest charts within a tooltip. But the problem is that until recently, tooltips themselves weren't really accessible at all. And Viz and tooltips, I believe, are still not accessible. So what do? Ideally, everything you build is accessible. We're providing a ramp. We're making sure that the ramp is available and it's structurally sound. But as noted in the Tableau docs on accessibility, not everything is accessible. Only, these items that are highlighted here are. These are the things that provide that solid accessible structure. But if there's not a ramp, if you can't get the ramp somewhere, you actually need to bring the content to the ramp. So one of the simplest ways to do that is via view data. It's not the best way to serve up data, but if the choice is between providing access to extra information versus not providing it at all, I'd rather provide the data. So you want to just make sure that that view data is available to your users. You haven't unchecked that permission on your Tableau server or cloud site. So making sure your end users can view data, it just makes the data rollerama open to everyone. So, whew, that was a very fast loop around the roller rink of universal design and accessibility. And I want to leave you with a few things to take away from this talk. First, remember the pop-out effect and how pre-attentive attributes contribute to building more universally usable design. Design techniques like the squint test and user research techniques like usability testing, along with tools like color contrast checkers and color blindness simulators, can help you refine your design choices. And once you've got something that works, operationalize it using custom color palettes and themes. Tools like Alex Woletzek's Color Manager for Tableau and DataViz's custom theme generator can simplify the process greatly. Second, words matter. DataViz is about more than just the data. You need to provide pathways for sighted users and those with vision deficiencies, for users with motor issues and those without. All users need to be able to get to the data and also understand the data and its context. The other side of words is advocacy. Usability and accessibility can be easily overlooked when we're building out Tableau dashboards, so just stop it. Talk about color blindness, talk about descriptions, talk about button sizes, all the other things that I talked about. When you're sharing a new design, just talk about it. Make sure it's on the table. And join the accessibility tug. Share your own own stories of disability if you feel comfortable doing so. And if you do want to share at the accessibility tug, reach out to me on the Tableau community Slack because we're always looking for speakers. And then finally, test, test, and test again. Don't make sure that clicking this button makes that happen or clicking a bar filters another chart. I mean, don't just make sure that you do that. That is user acceptance testing or UAT. You need to do that. That is necessary, but it's not sufficient to building out good dashboards. You also want to test your dashboards with your actual users to make sure that they're helping your users meet their goals. Don't make assumptions about what your users know or what they can see or are seeing or what they can easily interact with. Test with them to confirm that what you've built is both usable and accessible. Universal design and accessible design, they go hand in hand. Sometimes one shakes into a little cool flip like this, or the other kind of rattles around a bit. But often they simply rock and roll in sync. So thank you so much. And that's it. That's it. If you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat.
Wow, that was amazing, Roshni.
Thank you.
I've seen a lot of talks about various aspects of design, usability, but I've never seen such a comprehensive overview of that in one presentation. And you did it
That's why I had to talk real fast.
Yeah, well, you did it in under an hour, and that was impressive by itself. But thank you so much for
Yeah, you're very welcome.
putting in the effort and doing a great job of explaining that in an understandable way. Appreciate that very much. Do we have any questions? I didn't see too many DMs, but if somebody has a question, you can either come off mute or raise your hand. I think it'd be easier at this point just to come off mute. How about you, Israel? Go ahead and speak your question.
Sure. The question I had was, and I did message it to you, Homer, but I don't know if you got it.
Yeah, I did get yours, yes.
Okay, my question essentially is, Roshi, have you ever had to account for any sort of cultural or national differences in how you present data or in a visualization or infographic? Things that somebody from a Western country or environment may not think about when they're presenting something to an international group, maybe that's more Middle Eastern or Asian based?
I personally have not, but I've heard there's some sort of stories that get passed around there. For example, red. Red is often seen as a negative in Western culture, right? Like if you're in the red, that means you're losing money or it's dead. But in China, for example, red is seen as a positive color, and so like there's a whole host of things of color psychology is a whole study area on its own. But yeah, if you are building for multiple locales, you definitely want to take into consideration not just make sure that the numbers are formatted in the right way. You're using commas instead of periods for separating zeros, for example, in Germany or whatnot. But you do want to take into account like who are your end users. This goes back to make sure you know your users, like make sure you know your audience and you're actually building with them or building for them and testing with them. To make sure that you're not overlooking something, or maybe even perhaps insulting them by by putting some sort of something in the viz that you didn't intend to put in there, or you didn't, something that you didn't intend to create a negative experience for your end user with. Um, so yeah, there's a whole host of things that you really should consider if you're thinking about developing for different locales. And I unfortunately have no real resources to point anyone to for that, other than know your users, reach out to your users. They really are your partners in building data visualizations and dashboards, because you're building for them. You're not building for yourself. You're not building for the glory. You're building for them to help them do something.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Raghava, do you like to come off mute and voice your question?
Yes, hi. And sorry if my question's kind of close or completely out of scope for accessibility, but I'm thinking about we have a few use cases where we need our users to navigate between dashboards. Between that and we have some brand new users that come into Tableau that have no idea what we're doing as a data analytics team, and we keep getting questions on, hey, where do I find this? We have a hierarchical way of getting to dashboards from folders, and I'm trying to find ways where I can, without actually making a how-to video for them, try to get them to find their way or give as much as I can in the form of visualizations or something to let them navigate the dashboard or find their way to the next dashboard.
So there's a couple of things. So you can link from one dashboard to another within Tableau through URL actions. You do also have the problem of, okay, they got somewhere else, but now they need to get back and they may not know how to get back, which is a whole other problem. A couple of things that I want to mention about the data guide. So the data guide has, I know the accessibility here is highlighted, but it does have this area for additional resources. And this additional resources, you can add a number of links. I don't know what the max number is, but one thing you can try is, if there are related dashboards, you can throw in an additional link to those dashboards here. And yeah, navigation buttons, Cecilia mentions, those are really great at moving between dashboards too, or sheets, dashboards within the same workbook. So this additional resources, you can, again, link to other dashboards, link to how-to pages or documentation that you've written, or link to videos. You can link to, here's how you navigate Tableau Server, or, I know you said you didn't want to create a video, but often the video is like a short 30-second video about like how things are organized might be a lot better than a job aid or training page. I personally, I love writing documentation. I have a background as a technical writer, but oh my God, I hate using documentation. I'm more likely to just try to find a video or like figure it out on my own or ask someone. But if you can create a video, throw in a link here to the video. So there's a few different things that you can try directly within like the data guide. One other thing that we've tried it a few times. It's always failed a little bit. But with data dev resources, you can actually build out live. You can build out a dashboard of dashboards. So if you know that you have users of a certain, who like your admins are always going to go look at these 5 reports, those are their defaults, you can build out a dashboard of dashboards that has those grouped together for them. You can use user filters to like help like update what that dashboard looks like by the person's role, by what Tableau server or cloud groups they're part of. You can also create collections. Collections is, I want to say it's a newish feature, but I think it's been around for like 3 or 4 years now. Collections are another way of grouping dashboards. So instead of having people navigate through the like what could be many layered folder structure, you can actually send them to a collection. This is a collection of dashboards for admins, or this is the folder the collection of dashboards for the accounting team or the accounting people across several different business teams. So there's a lot that you can do with the Tableau server structure, whether through data dev or through the built-in like collections tags are another option that can help your users do that navigation a little bit more easily.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That additional resources would really come in handy. We are currently using navigation buttons but we're Like the example you gave about filter, where we use a image with the text. We tried to do that with navigation buttons, but we're strapped for real estate, so we ended up just using tooltips on just images.
Yep.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I've
And
been
also,
there.
I want to do a +1 on that comment she was making about collections. I think that's a great idea on the cloud, just to group things up together in collections.
Awesome. I'll check that out. Thank you very much.
And 23.2. So not quite 3 years, but pretty close.
Yeah, I didn't mean to link to the older ones. I'm not sure how I even got that, but there are these like free introductory little short videos that are broken out by role that you
Yeah.
might be able to use. I don't know if that's what you meant or not.
That is actually a great idea. Yeah, we took some of the navigating Tableau server videos. I think that's one of those free videos that's on this link. We took it and we edited it down a little bit. So instead of like you go to your Tableau server, like we actually did a 10 seconds of you go to tableau.mit.edu and here's what that the SSO login looks like. So we can actually sort of personalize it a little bit and just like splice together the Tableau provided videos with what we need to help our users sort of bridge the gap a little bit more easily. And these videos that Celia is mentioning, Israel, these are some really great resources. But there's a whole lot out there in the blog in the blog space all over YouTube. And there's some really great e-learning as well that's available through Tableau that can help. Yep, and the trailhead paths. Great too.
Okay. Well, we've reached the end of our time here. Does anyone else have a question that they're burning to ask? If not, we're going to bring this to a close here. We're going to want to thank Roshni again for an outstanding presentation.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for making the time for us. And if you're in Austin, do come see us. We'll let us know if you're there. We'll try to arrange an event around you. Just
So much pressure.
yeah. Just a reminder before we say adieu is our next meeting is coming up on the 12th. And it'll be a virtual meeting, and Raina Ortega will give an outstanding presentation, I am sure. There are people who have seen this presentation and commented how good it is. So mark that on your calendars. You'll be seeing the invites to register in your inbox very soon. So again, thank you everyone for attending. This meeting was recorded. It'll be posted in the next week, I would say. So you could keep your eye on your inbox for that link, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Homer. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Roshni.
Great to meet everybody.
Nice to meet you as well.